there, little mama. I am so excited that you joined us today. We are in a series on school choice. It is July, and we are not only talking about the freedom that we have in our country and how we really want more freedom for school choice, but we're also in School Choice Week. So that is actually a thing that's celebrated in our country, and we're celebrating it today with a very special guest. I want to ask you a question. Have you been wondering, is this stuff really in my kid's school? Is it just kind of a hyped up thing that's just like one more thing I need to be scared of? Do I really need to? I mean, my teachers seem so nice and it's so cozy in there, and like the decorations in the hallway and the songs they come home and sing. Surely this stuff isn't in my kid's school. Well, I have a special guest for you today, and we're going to be talking about that. We're not only going to be talking about her journey into homeschooling, which is our focus for this week, homeschooling, but we're also going to be talking about how that moved her and how she actually knows a whole lot more than just homeschooling. And we're going to be doing it today. Welcome to the Moms Like Us podcast, where moms just like you learn strategies, systems, and skills through expert interviews and real-life insight designed to take your marriage, mothering, and home to the expert level. Hi, I'm Mona Corwin, your mom mentor and host, author, international speaker, and the founder of the Moms Like Us Academy. I've been coaching moms for over 25 years, and I have some really good news for you. Motherhood isn't a natural talent. It's a skill, and you can learn it. You can crush it at motherhood instead of motherhood crushing you. So let's get to today's show. Okay, I've got to tell you, our guest today is Heidi St. And I've been following Heidi for a really long time, and we actually both post blogs and videos and things on the Countercultural Mom app. And I suggest, like I always do, that you go ahead and sign up for that app. And I will link it in the show notes once again for you. But I wanted to read you a bio that I have on Heidi. Well, Heidi and her husband, Jay, have been married since 1989. I mean, that just seems like it shouldn't be a long time ago, but I guess it was. And they have 7 children and 3 grandchildren. The St. John's homeschooled their kids all the way through high school, and Heidi is the author of 7 books. She also has hosted the popular podcast Off the Bench and is the founder of MomStrong International. This is a really cool thing. She's going to tell us about it. An online community of women learning God's word and how to apply it to everyday life. Because Heidi isn't just a homeschool mom, she's a teacher of moms. She and her husband, Jay, are also the founders of Firmly Planted Family and Firmly Planted Homeschool Resource Center located in Vancouver, Washington. And I just think that Heidi, in a nutshell, she is, number one, a candidate for Congress in Washington, seat 3, which she's going to tell you about. She is a wife and mom of 7. She's a best-selling author and speaker, and I love this fact about Heidi. She traffics in truth. You are going to love hearing from this truth teller, because that's what we're all about on Moms Like Us Do Things Like This. And her name is Heidi. Heidi, come on up. How are you? Oh, I got to get you out of the mute. We want to hear you talk. Your pretty face. We're happy to have that, but we absolutely want to hear you talking.
Hey there.
So glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
We meet face to face.
Yes, it's good. All the virtual meetings that we did in COVID. I said I'd never do it again, and I hear I'm doing it. So there you go.
But I mean to tell you, in this...
The technology is good.
Some of it. Some of it is really good. But we're going to take it and use it for the Lord, aren't we?
Yep, exactly right.
Okay, we're in School Choice, and we're in this series, and this is the homeschooling episode. So I want you, number one, to tell us these things. And you just go ahead and do it, and we're just going to have a conversation, and you just go ahead. But we want to touch on why we need to homeschool, how you decided to homeschool, were you sorry you homeschooled, and I mean, because you're at the end of it, and then really, how can they homeschool? maybe even some
Yeah.
government stuff that protects us in our homeschooling. And don't forget to tell us about all the things you're doing running for Congress. We're going
Well,
to,
you're gonna have to ask me one at a time. That was a mouthful.
it
You
is,
know,
but we're
I
just going to get started.
honestly, I think moms today need to know that the public school system that they think they know
Mhm.
doesn't exist anymore.
Hmm.
And I started talking about this probably 15 years ago. I never wanted to be a homeschool mom. I never planned on homeschooling. It was something that just seemed insane to me. I could not fathom why a mother in her right mind would stay locked up with her kids for 18 years in a row when a little yellow school bus come taken away for free. And in fact, my oldest daughter was in the public school system when we pulled her out. And so I loved her teacher. We were in a very small town, a little town called Canby, Oregon,
Lovely.
and I loved her school. But what was happening, what I noticed happening, was that she was coming home and she was hearing things on the playground that made me sad. And in second grade, my beautiful little 7-year-old turning 8, talking about things, asking questions that I felt like were totally inappropriate for her at that season of her life, and really wanting to protect her innocence as much as I could. And at one point, there was a bomb threat at the school. This is sort of in the beginning of what we have seen now ramp up to be terrible violence within our schools. And we can talk about, all the reasons for that. But at that time, I had we only had 3 children, and you said I had 3 grandbabies, but, I upped the ante. I now have 4. We have
As
our
soon
4th
as
was
I
just
said it,
born.
I thought, wait a minute. On the Facebook page, I
Yeah.
saw that.
Well, you know what? I haven't updated all the places yet because he's only about 12 days old. But it's amazing to me how quickly the time goes by,
Yeah,
and how quickly you go from being a mother to a grandmother. It happens very, very quickly. The
yeah,
the days are long, but the years are short.
it's so true.
And when Savannah was little, and her sister Sierra, so these girls are now respectively in their early 30s and late 20s. And I went to put her sister Sierra in school, and she missed the cutoff by a couple of weeks. And I had this really bright little 5-year-old that I thought should be doing something. I thought, here's this girl, and she's bored. And so I went down to a homeschool supply store, and I met a guy there. His name was Eli, and I was like, listen, dude, I'm not interested in homeschooling, so don't even give me the spiel. I just want to know, do you have a book that my child could work with, something beyond, the little workbooks that you find at Walmart and Costco? And he said yes. And he gave me a book called Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. Now, I'm looking for a book that will teach her colors, some sort of a workbook that's very, very, and I thought, could I really teach her to read? Like, I thought you had to have a degree to do that. Could I teach her to do that? 20 minutes a day? Surely I could do 20 minutes a day. So I started this little journey with my 5-year-old daughter, and I'd put her newborn brother down for a nap, and then I'd sit on the couch with her, and I started teaching her to read. And it became very, very clear to me quickly that I could do this thing. And not only could I do it, but I loved it. I loved the little light bulb moments. Her sister Savannah would get on the school bus and she'd be gone, 7, 8 hours. And I had this whole day with Sierra and her little brother. And I realized I had been lied to. These people that told me that I couldn't teach my kids, it was wrong. I could do it. And pretty soon, I was transforming our kitchen into a little classroom. I had the pictures of the presidents up on the wall. Well, to be fair, only the presidents I liked, but the presidents, up on the walls, and I had the alphabet, going across the top of up at the top of the ceiling. And my husband noticed a change in me. And I think God was just shaping my heart. He was showing me that this was actually my job. And not only had he made me for it, but I could enjoy it. And it was at the end of that year that I pulled Savannah out of the public school. I went to her teacher. I, took a wagon load of books with me because I wanted her to know I was serious. And I thanked her. I said, I respect you. I love you. You've been a wonderful teacher, but I'm going to bring my daughter home. And I wasn't sure what she would say. And as the Lord would have it, she just looked right at me and she said, this will be the best thing you ever do.
Whoa.
And if I could start over with my kids, I would have homeschooled them. Now, this was almost 24 years ago. This is a long time ago. And so, yeah, so I brought Savannah home, and none of the other kids have ever stepped foot in a public school. Most of our kids are grown now. We have 2 left at home. One of them is gonna graduate this year from our homeschool, and then our little caboose, she's gonna be in junior high. And so really nearing the end of my homeschool journey. Best thing we ever did for our family was keep our kids home and homeschool them, and it really does go by fast, and these kids are married now, several of them, they're having kids of their own. My grandkids are being homeschooled, and I want moms to know that you have options. And not only do you have options, but they're viable options, things that you can do. So if you're looking at yourself and you're going, I could never do that. I don't even like my kids, for goodness sake, they don't listen to me. Homeschooling is a lot about moms. It teaches you, it grows you up. It's a sanctifying process. I always tell, moms when I'm speaking around the country, if you want to find out how completely selfish you are, homeschool your kids. You're going to know really, really quickly, what are your weak spots, but God's going to grow you up in it, and he uses it, and God doesn't waste anything. And so there are a lot of moms who tell me I could never do it. My message to them is you absolutely can do it. It'll be the best thing you ever did. And they need to understand the danger that their children are in the public school system. It's not just that these schools are failing academically, and they are pushing ideologies on our children. Everything from Marxism, which is in every curriculum, to gender ideology, promoting the homosexual lifestyle, which they absolutely are. And your children are being injured body, soul, mind, and spirit. And I could sit here for hours and tell you story after story after story of moms who've come to me just weeping and said, I didn't realize until it was too late. And so if we send our kids to Rome, which is the public school system, and they're there for 12 years in a row, we shouldn't be surprised when they come out Romans. And by that I mean a lot of these kids are coming out and they have a worldview that's antithetical to their parents, and it's injuring the parent-child relationship, which frankly it's designed to do. And some kids survive it, but very few come out of the public school system unscathed. And so I think it's time for parents to take a good hard look at it.
I noticed there's something that Sam Sobor always talks about is that part about it's to take away your authority, and
Yep.
maybe they're not that it's not on their list or they don't have a class for it in their teacher training, but
Right.
the design absolutely does that. When you get a notebook home and you have to sign it, and if you don't, your kid gets in trouble when they go back to school, or they're shamed, or they have to come back and say your mom has to sign this. Like somehow that teacher, just that little teeny thing, plants a seed. Hey, you're not in charge.
Right. And your kids get that message then. For 12 years, they get that message. And
I
if
re-
you watch, the Democrats are trying to make it even earlier.
Oh yeah, I remember when I pulled our kids out of public school. We had fought all the way with our oldest one, and that's those on the podcast have already heard that story. But with these two little ones, Mallory was in school. She had an opportunity for Thanksgiving to go around and say something they're thankful for, and I'm like, this is your chance to shine for Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
say something about the Bible or the trees or something, but let's give God honor and thanks for what he's done. And so I'm like, okay, room mom, I'm sitting there waiting for my daughter, and they go around the room, and sure enough, it gets to Mallory, and she says the thing that the girl said in front of her. I'm like,
Yeah.
she just copied that kid.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, that's weird. I got her home and I'm like, hey, sis, how come you didn't, like give Jesus some, kudos? And she said, well, mom, we can't do that. She's in
Yeah.
fourth grade. She was in fourth grade. And she
Yeah.
said, we can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean you can't do that? Yeah, you
Yeah.
can. I said, mom's been fighting. You know you can. And she
Yeah.
said, my teacher is a Christian, mom, and she doesn't say anything about Jesus. We're not supposed to. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is worse. This is worse. Now I fought to get her a Christian teacher, and now
Yep.
this Christian teacher is showing her how to be in the world, but not how to be like the world.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this. And then she's got this crazy mom, right? That's like all Jesus and says Jesus a million times and goes and fights at the school board. I'm like, this isn't
Right.
this
Now she's got
somehow,
now her mom's like a fighter on top of all of
yeah,
it, right?
and then
Insult to
I'm the
injury.
one, I'm the one that they're laughing at, and everybody loves Mrs. McCullough. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
this is over. And
yeah,
so we found a Christian school and we took them. And I have to tell you, I did
yeah,
not stop looking at curriculum. I wish I had homeschool, but that was over 30 years ago. And I'm like, I really wish I would have. But
yeah.
it was a Christian school, and we
Well, and
went, and
Christian
I was
school
just
is
this,
a
you
good
still got to
option.
look.
Yeah, I graduated from a Christian school, and Christian education is in my blood. My grandparents. This was a long time ago. Because I was in school in the 70s, and my grandparents told me when I was very little, because they paid for me to go to a private school. My parents couldn't afford it, and my grandparents told me that education was the most important thing that they would ever do for me as a child. And they were correct. But I will say this, and I always tell parents this, I'm a huge fan of private school. If you can't homeschool, I think homeschooling is the gold standard. And the reason why I say that is because it gives you the thing that the school system strips away from you, and
Yes,
that is time with your children, and you will
absolutely.
never get
Get
it
back.
back. And a lot of those kids that I went to school with have since walked away from the Lord. And I'm not saying that like homeschooling is not the magic bullet. I know a lot of homeschool families who have lost their kids to the world and whose kids have walked away from the Lord. But in terms of just giving you the very best opportunity to influence your kids for the gospel and to be able to nurture them for life, homeschooling is the best option.
Yeah, but it was like that. Like Heidi, when did public schools, what was the year or the decade that public schools really started becoming it? Because people did their kids at home all the time.
Well, and if you look back at the history, and in fact, I've done a couple of podcasts about this with Alex Newman. I would encourage your listeners to go and Google those. The Heidi St. John podcast with Alex Newman, and he goes through the history of the public school system, and he makes a very compelling case. He will argue that the schools are doing now what they have always been designed to do. And so it was in the heart of the people that started these taking the children away from their parents all these years ago, and they knew that it was going to take a long time. If you read the Communist Manifesto, these guys, I mean, their whole point was to do what they called a slow march through our universities and a slow march through our college campuses and through our elementary and high schools. Well, that slow march is now just a race. They're
It
not
is.
slow marching it anymore. But I believe that Alex is correct. When you look at it, it's just that we've been tricked, this insidiousness, this idea that parents are not equipped to teach their own children is ridiculous. And if you think about it, we're talking in kindergarten. They're saying, oh, give us your kid in kindergarten because you can't do that. You just went 12 years through the system and you can't start at kindergarten. You can't teach your kid to read. You can't teach them basic colors, because the moment you give your children over to the schools, they belong to that system.
It is.
And it's serious, and like I told you before the show, I don't soft step this issue anymore. I used to, because 'cause I've been out on the circuit speaking for a long time. I've written 8 books. I talk about this all the time. My heart and passion in becoming MomStrong, which was a book I wrote, in 2017, was to tell moms, "Listen, this you're facing a battle right now that previous generations didn't even see coming." We didn't know that we were gonna have to talk to our kids about what a man was and what a woman was, and that people would be this confused and that they would be living in such wicked times. But we've been disarmed. And so now we're in the process of having to rearm ourselves and do the thing that we've been told for generations we can't do, which is educate our own children.
Well, and they're doing it by scaring us, right? By scaring us, saying,
100%.
number one, you can't. But this is where they're really getting it. They're getting it by saying, your kids are going to be weird and
Yeah,
they're not going to have any friends. They're not going to be socialized. So you need to give us your 4-year-old and call it
right.
school. It's not school, it's daycare. And we will socialize your kids. I'm like,
So dumb.
please don't believe this. They're not
Well, and
socializing your
actually,
kids. Well,
uh,
actually, they are for the wrong way. But you can do that on the playground. Like you said,
sure. Well,
you
and I
can't
would take
teach
it a
color
step
to your kids.
farther. I mean, this is such an insidious lie, the lie of socialization. And so, were your kids not socialized before they went to school? Right? Did they not know how to talk to people at the grocery store and they were just completely
No.
socially illiterate, and then you took them to school and the school fixed it? No. You believed the lie that you were doing it wrong, when in reality you were doing it right. And when and I do, interviews and such all the time on national broadcast television shows, and a lot of times, liberal progressives will say, aren't you worried about socialization? And I say, absolutely. And that is why I took my kid out of school. I'm 100% worried about socialization. You're going to
That's
teach
so
my kid that there is no God and there's 400 genders? Really? Here in Washington State, kids can identify as animals now. In the school district in Ridgefield, they've installed litter boxes into the bathrooms. Don't tell
stop.
me
You
that
are
this is
kidding.
not, nope, it's true. And don't tell me that they're not injuring your children.
Oh my gosh.
When you see parents taking their kids to pride parades and you watch what's happening at these filthy, disgusting displays uh, of of immorality, and we're subjecting our kids to this in the name of making sure that that they see all that there is to see in this world, we are injuring our children. And so when people ask me that, I love that question. Like, bring me the question, because that's exactly why I took my kid out of public school. I want my child to have a childhood, to actually enjoy a childhood. I want her playing with toads and dolls, and I want her out there. If my daughters, I have 5 daughters, and if they want to play with Matchbox cars and Lincoln Logs, I'm going to let them play with Matchbox cars and Lincoln Logs. And I'm never once going to say, you know what, you might be a boy. I'm not going to confuse them that way. I'm going to let them grow up. And that's what we're not doing with our children in the public schools.
I honestly, what is another lie that they're believing?
Well, in the schools, I
The
mean,
moms, the
truly,
school, yeah, the moms that
yeah,
are afraid to homeschool.
yeah.
What's another lie that they could possibly be believing?
Well, I think they think that they can't do the job of a teacher. That's a huge one, right? That my kids are not going to listen to me, that they're not going to obey. I
Yes.
send my kids to school because they don't respect me. Well, listen, mama, if your kid doesn't respect you, that's on you. And it's you think a 5-year-old disrespectful child is a bummer, try a 15-year-old disrespectful child.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of this is what I was saying in the beginning. You're going to learn to be a better mother through the process of homeschooling, and it's going to teach you to really interact with your children. And one of the things I love about home education is it gives you the opportunity. Curriculum is always secondary to character. And so if you're, trying to teach math to your kids, or if you're reading as read aloud with them, or you're studying, red sails to Capri, and you're looking at the island of Capri in ancient Greece, or whatever it is you're doing, and your kid's being rude and disrespectful, you have the opportunity to put that book down and address the character flaw in your child. And we've in my house, I mean, I've raised 7 children, right? So in my house, we took weeks off. Like, when I saw things that were going sideways in my home, I'd be like, "Oh, wow, look at that. We're gonna be doing chores this week. We're not gonna do school. We're gonna do chores. You guys are gonna learn how to power wash the sidewalk this week. Won't that be fun?" And there were moments when I would be, we'd be coming up against it, or the kids would be grouchy, or I'd be grouchy, or whatever. And I'd just stop school and say, "Hey, we're going to the park, or we're going out for ice cream, or we're going to go." You have the opportunity to do what the world says you can't do and excel at it,
That is
because you
beautiful.
will excel at it, because no one loves your kids more than you do. There's not a teacher on the planet. And, we probably should say, because I always get in trouble, uh, there are wonderful teachers in the
Yes.
public school. There are good and godly teachers in the schools, and we need them. And so I'm like, if God calls you to the school system, is the front line of the battle for the hearts and minds of your kids, and we need godly people there. But I'll tell you what, you would never send your kid to the front line of a battle if you knew. So I live very close to Portland, Oregon, which is just a garbage city now, thanks to the liberal policies that have ruined it. And I would never, ever, ever, ever in a million years take my 11-year-old daughter and give her a sack lunch and put her on a bus and send her to the front lines in Portland, Oregon. I wouldn't, because I know intrinsically that that's dangerous, that's a foolish thing to do. And yet that's what we do every single time we give our kids a sack lunch and pat them on the head and say, "We see you at 3." We've just sent them to the front lines of the most insidious cultural war that has ever been perpetrated against our children ever. And
And
every time I talk to moms, I tell them, "You are absolutely equipped. You can totally do this. No one loves your kids as much as you do. You're going to be a better person for it, and your kids are going to be healthy and whole because of your sacrifice to do this. It'll be the best decision that you ever made."
I love that. Another uh, thing I get is that moms want their kids to be salt and light.
Oh,
So you
these are all
kind
my
of,
favorite arguments.
I know, but I mean, but they're your favorite arguments because you have great answers for it. But know that deep down in the hearts of moms, these 4 and 5 questions are the ones they need answered. There's
100%.
nobody better for
Yeah.
you to other
Oh,
than
I'm
you to
so
answer it.
glad. I'm so glad you're asking because you're right. These are the questions I get all the time at my show, right? Salt and
Right.
light. Listen, I reject that argument 100 different ways. I reject it. Your children cannot be salt until they have salt. Your children cannot be light until they have the light of Jesus Christ shining through them and they understand the stakes of the battle that they're going to be fighting. There is a time for your kids to be on the front line. And that time comes very, very soon. Like I said, most of my kids are grown now and they're out there fighting these culture wars. And one of them works for Amazon. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the lives of my kids right now. But when your children are little, they are not equipped for battle. And shame on the church for perpetrating the salt and light lie. The salt and light uh, directive is given to adults. And yes, our children are learning to be salt and light, but the responsibility to be salt and light in the culture should never be placed on children. It should be placed on adults. And what I've watched is a whole generation now, generations of adults who are cowards and they're expecting their children to be salt and light. And I'm always telling parents, like, you want your child to be salt and light, let them see you do it. You want your children to have an active prayer life? Let them find you on your knees in prayer. Do you want your children to know God's word? You study God's word to do what Paul said, Timothy, to show yourself as a workman who does not need to be ashamed and can rightly handle the word of God. You do it first because we put our kids out onto the front lines and then we stand back and we wonder what happened when they fail or when they struggle or when they buy a lie or when they the worst things that can happen are when your children believe something that you know to be wrong but they've been indoctrinated for so long in the name of salt and light that now you're going to spend the rest of your life praying for them. And that's a true story. So the salt and light argument, that I love that you're asking that question, and I love that the moms are asking it because we can have an honest conversation about whose responsibility that is. It's not the child's, it's the parents.
Yeah, that was so well said. So well said, Heidi. I can tell your passion that's behind that. Um, and that's the one that you really can't. It's like, well, salt and light. It's like when they put that religious thing out there, you're just like, but even if they
Yeah.
are in there and you have to be salt and light in the school, you got to be, it's just as much work, Heidi, being homeschooled and having a good time or fighting the school board every other week.
Totally is.
I
It
mean, it
absolutely
was
is.
like a vacation when I finally got the kids to the Christian school. They said, "Do you want to see the curriculum?" I'm like, "Please, just let me out of the fight. I just wanted out of the battle. I was worn out." And the
Yeah.
thing that I want the moms to know is that it's not you're not this isn't new. Like, we've had to fight battles for our children for generations, for centuries, because there is an evil one that wants our kids. And
Yep.
this is nothing new. And for moms to think they can assign anything, Bible teaching, character development, and any reading, writing, and arithmetic, that they can assign that to someone else is not it's not biblical. We are supposed to be training them up. Deuteronomy tells us that. It's all over the Bible. We're supposed to be training our kids, not one little devotional on Monday afternoon that someone else has written that may not even apply to your kid, not in Sunday school, which is basically a commercial as far as I'm concerned. It's commercial.
Yep.
It's like
Yep.
1 hour in the middle of an entire week. And
Right.
so
And you're
uh,
expecting that to
to
undo.
work or
They
to grow
they
them up.
Yeah, you're expecting this 1 hour in Sunday school or God forbid, youth group, and that's gonna fix the hours and hours and hours of public school indoctrination that you're subjecting your children to Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
It's just it's simple math. It's simple math,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work, and I think we're realizing if it would have worked, it would have worked. If that worked,
And it's
we would have
not.
seen it.
And
And we're
it's not.
losing our kids. Yeah, it's not working, and we're losing our kids at record rates. And again, I mean, I feel the need to say, listen, if you're looking for a panacea, if you're looking for, homeschooling's the answer, nothing's ever going to go wrong. The birds are going to sing, the laundry's going to fold itself, my kids are going to love me and respect me, and I'm never going to have a bad day. That's not reality. What I'm saying is everything that's worth it in this life, and I think our kids are worth it. Every sacrifice we make, if something is worth it, it will be hard. Marriage is a great example. Jay and I are coming up on our 33rd wedding anniversary, and I'm telling people, marriage is hard, but it's good. It's worth it. It's worth the sacrifices. It's worth all of the effort that we put into it. Your children are worth it. Homeschooling is hard because it's good. And all the things that are good are going to be a struggle in this life. And I applaud the parents who are looking at this right now and starting to see the light and make these decisions for their kids. Because I think we can see a sea change if parents will just wake up to what's happening in education.
So when you being in Washington, you're running, you are
Yeah.
running. And what is your platform? I assume has to do with school choice too.
Sure, it does. Yeah, I mean, I believe that that the time for school choice has long since come. If a parent finds out that your child is being taught critical race theory and comprehensive sex education and the 1619 project, and they're told that there is no God and all these things, right? You should be able to go down to that district and say, "Hey, thanks for playing Russian roulette with my kid. I'm going to take him out of your school district, and the money should follow the child." This is a complicated discussion, particularly for me as I come at this from a position of protecting homeschool freedom. I do not believe that homeschoolers should ever take government money. I have a whole lot of reasons for that. Parents need to remember, with shekels come shackles, and that's the truth. And so once we start taking government money and applying it to homeschool programs, you're going to see the government that, the big camel's nose is going to be under the homeschool tent. And I don't want it anywhere near homeschooling. But when you're talking about public schools in particular, because there will always be people who will leave their children in these failing schools, uh, I think that the best solution right now, because the public schools don't speak English, they speak money. And unless and until they feel like they're going to start losing students over this, and a student's going to go to a district that's not teaching this garbage, they're going to continue to do it. And so I'm a huge proponent of school choice. But I ran for Congress. I'm running, my election's in just a couple of weeks on August 2nd, um, because we have a leadership crisis in this country. We have a leadership crisis from STEM to Stern, from our school boards to the White House. We have a leadership crisis. And it's not going to change until we start sending men and women of integrity and character and godly women and men to these positions. And I keep hearing the church forever and ever talk about, how many sermons have you sat through on Ephesians 6, right? About the spiritual war that we're in. And Paul's talking about it, and he's saying, hey, we don't battle a flesh and blood enemy, put on the whole armor of God. And yet we send people into positions of authority in our government, into the front lines of a spiritual battle, who cannot wield a spiritual weapon. We got to stop doing that.
That's beautiful. Well, I was going to ask if you had one thing that you wanted to tell a mom, but I think you kind of covered it. All the good things, all the good things. Thank you so much for being with us today. You are a light on a hill. You truly are salt and light. And the encouragement that you have to give to women through all the aspects, what you're doing is so, so valuable. And I'm so grateful that there are women like you that will hear God's voice. And although they don't want to, because you told me you didn't at first, they will obey. And obedience is pleasure to the Lord. He
Mm.
does not want sacrifice, he wants obedience. And moms, you moms out there that are feeling in your heart that you're afraid for your children, you can do this. You can try. And the resources are abundant. They even have the pod things. Have you heard about this, Heidi? Where there's a group of, you know, 10 career-minded women or whatever they got going on,
Right.
and they're like, "Hey, you're not doing that to my kid." And they're just saying, "Hey, there's a teacher over there. We like Mrs. So and so. We just think she's amazing. Let's pay her 100 grand and have her take care of our 5 kids, our 10 kids." And
Hmm.
teachers are
Yeah.
leaving and getting
Yeah.
their own insurance and investing their own money. at 100 grand a piece.
Well, it's a
Why
great
not?
idea. It's a great idea, and there's so many like, we didn't even touch on this, but my husband and I started the Homeschool Resource Center here. We have 1,600 students that come through this building every single week, and we are offering over 230 classes here.
Beautiful.
Everything from the Constitution to so the idea is if a homeschool mom comes to me and she says, "Listen, I'm willing to try, but I'm not teaching biology. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. I'm not dissecting a frog on my kitchen counter. I'm not doing it."
Yuck.
Well, great. We've got a biology class for you. You know, if your kids want to be in dance, we have dance programs. We have a thriving theater program here. We have a beekeeping program, a ceramics program. And the kids are really getting, and everything is done a la carte. So we don't take anyone full time, but we'll let you put your kid in maybe 3 or 4 classes. And so it's a supplement to what you're doing at home, and it helps parents with community. And we're looking to start these all over the country. So we planted over 60 homeschool cooperatives. My husband and I did around the United States, and now we're looking at this model. And I think it's an amazing thing what's happening here in Vancouver.
That is a perfect model. Do you have one in Dallas?
No, but we're looking there. We're looking
That's where
there.
I'm at.
All right.
You have to
I'm
come
gonna keep
see me.
talking to you about it. Sure.
Okay. Well, again, I'm so grateful that you spent your time talking to us and helping moms just like us, just like you, really make an impact, not only on the world, but on generations to come and on the culture that we live in. We can be salt and light. We just have to join together because moms like us, we do things like this. Okay, little mamas, we will see you next time on Moms Like Us Do Things Like This because moms like us too. We're doing things like this, and we want you to come and join us. See you later. Bye for now.